Hey, happy Friday. This week, the MacBook Neo is so successful it causes its own chip shortage. Elon wants to build a chip fab together with Intel, and Samsung becomes too profitable for their own good. Welcome to the Friday Checkout. This video was sponsored by NordVPN. Okay, for my first story of the week, an exclusive report from the fantastic newsletter Colpium says that Apple has an unexpected dilemma. The MacBook Neo is proving to be too popular, and Apple is therefore running out of the chips that they need to make it. As you probably know, the Neo ships with an A18 Pro chip from last year's iPhones, but what you might have missed is that the laptop uses a version with only 5 GPU cores instead of the usual 6 that you would get on an iPhone. Of course, these are the same chips, it's just that the ones that are in the MacBooks have been produced with slight defects that weren't good enough to make the cut for the iPhone. In other words, the MacBook Neo chips are not from a new production run, but instead they're essentially just leftovers from the iPhone, and these chips are no longer being made. This kind of explains why the Neo can be so cheap in the first place, right? Because they're just using up all the leftover chips. This process is called binning, by the way, and it's very typical in the chip industry, but what isn't typical is that the Neo turned out to be way more popular than Apple anticipated, and so they're simply running out of the low-tier chips that they were supposed to use here. Quote, MacBook Neo's A18 Pro was, past tense, built on TSMC's 3nm process, N3E. That node is now hugely popular and effectively sold out. If Apple wanted more of the chips, they would have to convince TSMC to restart their production line. They'd probably have to pay extra for that because they're already booked out anyway, and so that would turn these chips into very expensive ones rather than very cheap ones, and then together with all the RAM prices increases and everything else, that would kind of defeat the point of this device. Okay, for my second story of the week, you might remember that Elon Musk recently announced that SpaceX and Tesla were going to build advanced chip factories in Austin, Texas. They called this the Terafab because, of course, they gave it a cool name. Musk said that it would produce chips for humanoid robots, data centers, and more very soon, and all of this had experts very confused because you can't really just do that. Building a leading-edge chip fab is one of the hardest things to do in the world. It requires like a decade or more of slowly acquiring loads of knowledge and equipment, and that is just like not the timeline that Elon was talking about here at all. But this week, we kind of learned what his trick might be. The very diplomatic Reuters writes, quote, Intel joins Musk's Terafab AI chip project, while a bit more direct is Electrek saying that, quote, Tesla won't really build its own chip fab, Intel is going to do it. Specifically, Intel says that their ability to design and fabricate and package ultra-high-performance chips at scale is what Elon was after. Now, most likely, Elon's engineers will work with Intel to create a custom version of a chip fab, specifically for their needs, and honestly, that's still pretty cool as well, especially given that Intel really needed a customer that would validate their foundry model. You know, they really want to manufacture chips for others, and now they have a real customer, it seems. Elon loves his companies being vertically integrated, with Tesla, for example, being one of the few car companies that actually designs its own chips, writes its own software, manufactures some of its own battery cells, and even refines some of its own lithium. So them taking more control over their own chip manufacturing certainly fits into this vision. And I also wonder that as chip manufacturing becomes more and more important, whether we'll see companies like Apple or Nvidia eventually co-owning some factories with some chip manufacturer like TSMC, Samsung, or Intel in the future as well. I think the idea might catch on, let's see. Okay, for my third story of the week, Samsung's profit surged 8-fold in Q1 of 2026, driven by the AI data center boom, but meanwhile, the company may also end up losing money on its mobile devices this year for the first time since over a decade. That's right, their chip business is becoming so profitable that it's making its own device businesses unprofitable. That's genius! This great chart from Reuters shows the absolute bonkers profitability increase over time, where the last quarter simply looks like it came out of a completely different company, and meanwhile, Counterpoint compared their profits to other tech companies, which also looks absolutely insane. Samsung is suddenly almost as profitable as Nvidia, with analysts expecting that they might even overtake them next quarter, while they've now also soared past the likes of TSMC, Microsoft, Meta, and Alphabet already. Memory chips are the hot new thing, and Samsung is clearly profiting off of them like crazy. And on a related note, I actually have a new segment that I wanted to try out in the video. Let me know how you feel about it. I'm calling it Stonks, not Stonks for now, looking for a better naming suggestion if you have any, and it's a super brief look at the best and the worst performing publicly traded tech companies of the week. The winners this week are Intel due to their deal with Musk and another data center deal with Google, and on top of these we also have companies like SK Hynix, SanDisk and Micron, all of which make memory chips and all of which profited from Samsung's earnings. Meanwhile, the losers worth highlighting are Palantir, who would have presumably profited from war and is therefore not happy about a ceasefire, along with Lucid, Tesla and BYD, whose EVs missed out on higher oil prices, while Lucid also had a big recall at the start of the week. So let me know what you thought about this segment. Should I do it again? Should I give it a different name? I'm all ears. And just a quick note, I'm actually recording this on Thursday at night, so by the time you're watching this, the stocks might have changed a little bit. Okay, and as for our release monitor, we have a very short one starting with the Insta360 Snap, which is a selfie screen that you attach magnetically and via USB-C to your phone. You can use it to control your camera and to see your picture, and you also get a ring light with it. Okay. And next, do you know that DJI makes e-bikes? That's right. They have a brand called Amflow as well as a drivetrain system called Avinox, all of which got a big refresh, bringing them up to a pretty bonkers 1,500 watts among other things. And the prices for the entry-level models now also start at around $4,000, which, believe it or not, is actually quite cheap in this category. Now for context, pedelec bikes in European cities are limited to only 250 watts, so 1,500 is crazy high. That's very powerful. Admittedly, these are for off-road use and also for other countries in many cases, so they fall under different jurisdictions and regulations, but I think they're so powerful that a lot of regulators, even in countries like the US, will actually be interested in probably reining these in eventually. Anyway, moving on to the brief, Skoda announced a new bike bell called the Duo Bell. They specifically designed it so that the bell sound pierces through the noise cancelling on headphones, which they claim will reduce collisions a lot. They're hoping to launch it in London soon, and they say that they're making their research public. Pretty cool. Next, SiFive has raised $400 million this week from investors that include Nvidia. SiFive is probably the best known company in the West for making RISC-V chips, and this new round raises hopes that the new ISA to challenge x86 and ARM might be popularized relatively soon. Then, moving on to news that seems tailor-made for me, the Galaxy S25 Ultra gets an Ocean Mode update. This is a special camera mode that autocorrects for distortions and color changes while diving. I want it. Next, here's a headline that I definitely did not see coming. Valve brought Steam Link to the Apple Vision Pro as a beta release. This means that you can now stream your Steam library from Windows, Mac, or Linux over to your Vision Pro, kind of like a remote desktop. Importantly, these are not VR games, but rather just 2D games that will be floating in front of you in a kind of window, but that is still a pretty cool use case, especially for a Vision Pro that needs all the cool use cases that it can get. Moving on, the world's biggest battery maker, which is China's CATL, takes their ambitions to the high seas. They launched a big new business unit focusing on making batteries for ships, as they say this will be one of the next big categories to electrify. Fun fact, my next big TechAltar video will be about electrifying ships, so I'll have a lot more to say about the challenges of electrifying ships over on that channel. Meanwhile, also this week, Anthropic just announced that they have a new tool called Mythos, which is a new cybersecurity AI model, but it is apparently so powerful that they had to limit its use right away. A select group of customers, including Amazon, Apple, and Microsoft, are trying it out now, I guess to make sure that they find any security vulnerabilities in their own codes before the randos do. And even after that, the model should only be available to vetted organizations, including Broadcom, Cisco, and CrowdStrike. This is very funny timing because Anthropic just leaked the source code of their own Claude code like last week. They also had information about Mythos leak before that became public, and then they also had outages basically the whole last week, so they could really use some of these tools themselves internally, I guess, as well. And then moving on to another wild headline, Germany power prices turn deeply negative on renewables surge. Apparently Easter was unusually sunny in Germany and the factories were also shut down due to the holidays, so there was low demand, and as a result, intraday power prices plunged to as low as negative 323 euros a megawatt hour at 3 p.m. Of course, having loads of batteries would have been really good for the country at this point, but the current energy minister from the Conservative Party of Germany is actually a gas lobbyist, at least she was before she became an energy minister, and so guess what the country is doing instead of buying batteries? That's right, they're doubling down on gas in the middle of a gas crisis. Fantastic! Meanwhile, since everyone is rightfully fawning over the photos that the Artemis astronauts are taking of the moon these days, I also found a really cool map that lets you zoom in and out of the moon like it's Google Earth. You can get really close and the resolution is just amazing. This was done before Artemis, but it's really cool. Of course, this is linked below along with all the other news stories and products that I mentioned in this video. And while we're talking of the moon, the astronauts that went on the Artemis 2 mission hilariously also had an issue with Microsoft Outlook not working in space, and they said the following.
And then I also see that I have 2 Microsoft Outlooks, and neither one of those are working. If you want to remote in and check Optimus on those 2 Outlooks, that would be awesome.
Ah yes, that is immediately iconic. Even when you are as far away from Earth as you could possibly be, somehow Outlook still manages to annoy you. Now, whenever I'm far away from home and one of my apps or websites doesn't load for some reason, one of the first things that I try is my sponsor NordVPN. It turns out half the time the issue isn't the internet itself, but many services like banks and streaming services geo-blocking me while I'm in a different country. NordVPN lets me get around that and also lets me access content from abroad that might be geo-blocked in my country. I've tried this with dozens of different services in many different countries and it usually works, plus of course flipping it on is the first thing that I do before surfing on a public Wi-Fi like at an airport or a hotel, where having an extra layer of security is nice. Now, you're a techie, so you already know what a VPN is for. The question is, why would you get NordVPN? To start with, you do it because it is extremely fast and reliable. Switching between servers shows you how incredibly responsive it all is, and when you're connected, the speeds are so fast that you don't even notice it being on. Next, you get Nord because of the massive number of servers that they have. You can select almost any country that you can think of, and in many, you can even pick your own city. Also great is that you can connect up to 10 devices with a single plan, which I've recently learned even includes smart TVs. How cool is that? And the final reason to get Nord is because with my link nordvpn.com/Friday checkout, which is also in the description, you can get 4 extra months for free if you choose a 2-year plan. And there's also a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there is no risk in giving them a try. Again, that is nordvpn.com/Friday checkout, and I'll see you next Friday.